The wind howled through the cracks in the stone walls like it always did at night, carrying the faint metallic clang of chains from the ore haulers far below. I had grown used to that sound. It was the only lullaby this place offered. Ore in 47 wasn't a mine for men who craved company. It sat on the northern ridge of black rock, far from trade roads and farther still from anything that could be called a town. Just whinstone, the endless grind of the water wheel, and the slow scrape of hammers against ore. I had chosen this silence 2 years ago. After the escort job that left 3 friends dead and a weight in my chest, I couldn't name the quiet here was the only thing that didn't feel like a lie. That night began like every other. I checked the oil lamps along the corridor, locked the production ledger in the iron box, walked the perimeter of the water wheel to make sure the buckets were turning clean, then climbed the narrow stairs to my room in the eastern watchtower. The space was small enough that I could touch both walls if I stretched my arms. A narrow cot, a wooden table, a round window overlooking the waste rock pile, and a chest for my few belongings. I slid the heavy iron bolt into place myself, twisting it twice, the way I always did. I poured half a cup of the bitter mountain tea, drank it while staring at the grain in the ceiling beams, then lay down. I went to sleep alone. I was certain of that. When I woke, the first thing I noticed wasn't the wind or the distant clank of chains. It was warmth, not the thin warmth of the blanket or the dying coals in the small brazier. This was the living heat of another body close enough that I could feel the slow rise and fall of breath against my shoulder. My hand shot under the pillow before my eyes even opened, fingers closing around the hilt of the knife I kept there. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned my head. A girl, an orc girl, was lying on her side right next to me on the narrow cot. Her long black hair spilled across the pillow and brushed my arm like cool silk. Her skin was a pale, almost silvery green under the last flicker of the oil lamp, nothing like the deep forest green of the border warriors I had seen in the past. Her face was calm, lashes resting against her cheeks, lips slightly parted. She was asleep. I froze. The room was exactly as I had left it. The bolt on the door was still thrown. The window was latched. There were no footprints on the dusty floorboards, no broken latch, no sign that anything had been forced. Yet here, she was sharing the narrow space of my cot as if she belonged there. I shifted my weight, trying to slide away without waking her. The movement was enough. Her eyes opened at once, sharp, violet gray, completely alert. She did not flinch. She did not reach for a weapon. She simply looked at me steady and unafraid and whispered in a low, accented voice that carried the faint roll of mountain stone. "You're awake." I sat up halfway, keeping the knife ready, though I did not draw it. My voice came out rough. "How did you get in here?" She glanced around the tiny room, as if the question itself was odd. Then she answered simply, "I came while you were sleeping." I almost laughed from pure frustration. "I know you came while I was sleeping. I mean how the door was bolted from the inside." I checked it twice. She tilted her head hair sliding over one shoulder. "You were alone? Now you're not." The words settled in my stomach like cold iron. I studied her more carefully in the weak light. Her clothes were close-fitting black fabric, the seams impossibly fine, nothing like the rough leathers or patched mail of ordinary orcs. Thin metal bands circled her wrists etched with symbols I had never seen. Every small movement she made was precise, economical, almost graceful. She did not look like any orc I had ever encountered. I swallowed. "What's your name?" She met my eyes without hesitation. "I am Velra." I kept my voice level even though my pulse was roaring in my ears. "Why are you here, Velra? In my room, in my bed, in a mining station no outsider should be able to reach without being seen." She held my gaze for a long moment. The oil lamp sputtered once, throwing shifting shadows across her face. Then she spoke again, soft but certain, as if the answer explained everything. "Because I chose you." The words hung between us in the cold air of the tower room. Outside, the wind kept howling across the black rock. Inside, the silence felt heavier than stone. I had gone to sleep alone last night. I was not alone anymore. and something far larger than a simple intruder had just stepped into my life. I stared at her in the dim flicker of the dying oil lamp, the knife still heavy in my hand. The words, "because I chose you," hung between us like frost on the window pane. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to stay even. Panic would solve nothing. I had survived 2 years in this godforsaken station by staying calm when everything else went to hell. I sat up, fully swinging my legs off the narrow cot so my back pressed against the cold stone wall. I kept the blade ready but pointed downward. I need answers. Real ones. Who are you really? Where did you come from? And why the hell did you choose me? Velra didn't flinch. She sat up slowly, moving with that same quiet precision, her long black hair falling over one shoulder like spilled ink. She glanced once at the bolted door, then at the round window still firmly latched as if checking them herself. My name is Velra. That much is true. But I am not from any of the border clans your people trade with or fight. My kind live deeper. Older blood. We do not walk the open roads or trade in your markets. We stay hidden. I narrowed my eyes. Hidden how this station has guards' dogs tripwires on the outer ridge. No one just walks in. She tilted her head slightly, studying me the way a scholar studies a map. People see what they expect to see. I am not what they expect. I let out a short, bitter breath. That's not an answer. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I have been near Orin 47 for several days, not inside the main compound, in the high-maintenance shafts and the rock crevices above the waste piles. I watched. I listened. The skin on my arms prickled. You watched me? Yes. Her violet-gray eyes held mine without shame. I know your name is Elias Vane. I know you check the bolt twice every night. I know you walk the western ore path before dawn to watch the first haul come in. I know you drink the bitter tea and stare at the ceiling until you fall asleep. You live alone. You speak to almost no one. You carry old weight in your shoulders. Every word landed like a stone dropped down a well. I had never told anyone those small habits. No one here cared enough to notice. The fact that she knew them meant she had been close enough to see me when I thought I was invisible. I swallowed hard. Why me? There are 50 men in this station. Some of them have rank, some have weapons and authority. Why crawl into my bed in the middle of the night? Velra looked down at her hands for the first time. The metal bands on her wrists caught the lamplight. 3 nights ago, you ordered the night crew to pull a strange metal pod from the underground stream in the northern cut. It was caught between 2 boulders. You thought it was debris. You had it dragged to the temporary storage shed. I remembered. A black, smooth shell the size of a coffin half submerged in the poisoned runoff water. I'd figured it was some lost mining gear or wreckage from a higher pass. We'd winched it out and left it for morning inspection. You were inside it, I said slowly, the realization hitting me like cold water. She nodded once. The pod was my escape craft. It failed. The current dragged me here. When you gave the order to pull it free, you saved my life without knowing it. I woke inside the shed. I saw you walk past the open door checking the seals. You did not raise an alarm. You simply helped. That was the moment I chose you. I rubbed a hand over my face, trying to piece it together. So you waited until I was asleep, slipped past every lock and every guard, and lay down next to me like it was normal. I needed somewhere safe, she said quietly. Somewhere no one would look. And I needed to know the man who had pulled me from the water was not the kind who would sell me the moment he saw green skin. I let the knife rest on my knee, but didn't let go of it. You're running from someone. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. Yes, my own people. A faction inside my clan wants to use me to claim old rights paths through the mountains that have been sealed for centuries. I refused. They hunt me now. If they find me here, they will not ask questions. They will take what they want and leave bodies behind. I glanced at the bolted door again. The wind outside moaned through the stone. Somewhere far below, a chain rattled as the night shift moved o'er. If what she said was true, bringing her out into the open could turn the entire station into a battlefield. I exhaled slowly. You could have gone to the foreman, or the guard captain. They have weapons. They have numbers. Velra's eyes softened just a fraction. They also have fear and greed. I have seen what men do when they smell power or reward. You were alone. You pulled the pod because it was the right thing to do, not because you expected payment. When you sleep, your breathing is steady. You do not reach for a weapon in your dreams. I have not felt safe near another living soul in a very long time. The silence stretched. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Part of me still wanted to shout for the night watch, drag her out, and let the station deal with it. The smarter part, the part that had learned the hard way what betrayal and loss felt like, knew that handing her over might be signing a death warrant for more than just her. I looked at her again. She sat perfectly still, waiting, not pleading, not threatening, just there. I'm not promising anything I said at last, voice low, but I'm not calling the guards yet either. You stay in this room until I understand the full story. You don't leave. You don't let anyone see you, and if you lie to me even once, I bolt the door from the outside and walk away. Understood. Velra inclined her head a small, solemn motion. Understood. I stood up, legs stiff, and moved to the table. I poured the last of the cold tea into the single tin cup and set it in front of her. She took it with both hands, as if the small gesture meant more than it should. I sat back down on the edge of the cot knife, still within reach, and watched her drink. The lamp sputtered lower. Outside, the wind kept howling across the black rock. I had gone to sleep alone. Now I had an orc girl in my room, a secret that could get us both killed, and the strange, unsettling feeling that the silence I had chosen for 2 years was no longer enough. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted it to be. I kept her in the room for the rest of that night and the next day. The station ran its usual rhythm below us, chains clanking, hammers ringing, men shouting orders, but inside the small tower room everything felt suspended, like the air itself was holding its breath. Velra spoke in pieces, careful and measured, as if every word had been weighed 100 times before it left her mouth. She told me her people were not the border clans I knew from stories and skirmishes. They were older, hidden, a bloodline that had withdrawn into the deep stone passages beneath the mountains long before humans ever built their first roads. They watched the world from the shadows, never stepping fully into it. Most of their kind had faded from memory. The few who still lived guarded secrets, ancient paths through the rock that could move armies or trade caravans in a single night, relics of power no surface lord had ever touched. I am the last of the direct line that can open those paths, she said quietly, sitting cross-legged on the floor with her back against the wall. My refusal to hand that right to the faction that wants war has made me a threat. They would rather see me dead than free. I listened without interrupting at first. I sat on the edge of the cot, elbows on my knees, turning the tin cup in my hands even though it was empty. So you ran in that metal pod, she nodded. It was meant to carry me far beyond their reach. The current brought me here instead. You pulled me out. That is why I came to you when I needed a place no one would look. I asked the obvious question. If the pod got you this far, why didn't you just repair it and leave the same night? Her violet-gray eyes flicked toward the round window and the black rock beyond. The craft is damaged. The crystal that powers its movement is cracked. I need time, 3, perhaps 4 days to mend it properly. I also needed a safe place to work without being seen. And she hesitated, the first real pause I had heard from her. I needed someone I could trust, not to sell me the moment my back was turned. The days that followed blurred together in a strange rhythm. Velra only moved when the station was at its quietest deep in the night, or in the gray hour before dawn when the night shift had gone below and the day crew had not yet climbed the stairs. She never stepped outside the room. She never made a sound that could carry through the stone walls, but every time I returned from my shift, she was there. She began to leave small things for me. One morning I found a handful of sharp-scented mountain herbs on the table. They turned the thin station stew into something almost worth eating. Another night, she asked about the old scar that ran across the back of my left hand. I told her the story how I had tried to pull a friend from a collapsing mine shaft 2 years earlier and failed. She listened without pity, only quiet understanding, and when I finished, she touched the scar once lightly with the tips of her fingers. "You still carry them," she said. "The ones you could not save." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence I had wrapped around myself for 2 years started to feel different, with her in it. Before Velra, the quiet had been armor. Now it felt like a room with one too many empty chairs. I found myself looking forward to the moment the bolt slid shut and we were alone again. We spoke of small things and large things in the same low voices. I told her why I had come to Orin 47. She told me what the hidden halls beneath the mountains looked like when the crystals woke at night walls of living stone that glowed soft blue and remembered every footstep that had ever crossed them. She was not cold the way I had first feared. She watched everything. She remembered everything. And she gave back in small, careful ways that made the stone walls of the tower feel less like a cage and more like a shelter. But the station itself began to change around us. On the third night, the dogs in the outer pen started barking at nothing. Not the usual short bursts at passing wildlife, but long, uneasy howls that rose and fell like they were answering something far away. The next morning, a watchman swore he had seen a flash of metal high on the western ridge, something that moved against the wind and then vanished. The tripwires along the northern cut rang once at midday with no cart or crew anywhere near them. I told Velra everything when I returned that evening. She stood by the window looking out into the gathering dark, and her shoulders tightened. "They are here," she said, "the hunters my faction sent. They do not come loud. They come like smoke until they decide to burn." I watched her profile against the last gray light. The weight of what she carried pressed down on me heavier than any ore cart. If I handed her over now, the station might stay safe. If I kept her hidden, and they found out every man here could pay for my choice. I thought about the empty cot I had slept in alone for 2 years. I thought about the way her breathing had steadied beside me that first morning. I thought about the small bundle of herbs she had left on the table and the quiet way she had asked about my scar. I made the decision before I could talk myself out of it. "If they come for you inside these walls," I said, voice low but steady, "they will have to go through me first." Velra turned from the window. For the first time since she had appeared in my bed, something like surprise crossed her face, quick and gone again, but I saw it. She studied me for a long moment, then gave a single solemn nod. Then we stand together, Elias Vane. The wind outside rose again, whistling through the stone. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once more, sharp and afraid. I slid the bolt on the door and turned back to the room that no longer felt like it belonged only to me. I had chosen my side. The alarm bell on the main watchtower shattered the night like a hammer on stone. I was halfway through writing the shift report when the first clang rang out, sharp, urgent, the kind reserved for rock slides or raiders. I dropped the quill and ran for the stairs. Velra was already at the round window, her silhouette tense against the glass. She didn't speak until I reached her side. "3 shadows on the northern ridge," I said, breathing hard. "Moving fast, no banners, no torches. The watchman says they're too coordinated for bandits." Velra pressed her palm to the cold glass. Her voice was flat certain. "They are the hunters my faction sent. They do not come loud. They come like smoke until they decide to burn." Orin 47 was never built for war. We had crossbows on the walls, a few barrels of black powder for blasting, and tools meant for breaking rock, not men. If those hunters reached the inner compound, the station would fall in minutes. I knew it. She knew it. I grabbed my coat and the heavy miner's pick I kept by the door. We use the mine against them, lock the northern chain haulers to block the main cut, dump the waste rock on the western choke point, keep the men on the high catwalks with crossbows. We fight from above and let the mountain do the rest, Valra turned from the window. I will not hide while others bleed for me. You're the reason they're here, I said. If they see you, they stop caring about the rest of us. Her violet-gray eyes flashed. Then let them see me. This is my hunt, not yours. We stared at each other across the small room. For a moment, the wind outside was the only sound, then I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint silver lines on her skin catch the lamplight. You stay in the control house, I said. You work the old crystal panels. If that broken pod of yours still has any power left, use it. But you do not step outside. That's the deal. She held my gaze a long second, jaw tight. Finally, she gave one sharp nod. The deal. We moved. The station came alive in the way only frightened men can manage. Orders flew. Chains groaned as the night crew locked the northern haul road. Barrels of waste rock were tipped into the narrow western pass with a roar that shook the ground. I took position on the third catwalk with a loaded crossbow and the pick strapped across my back. Below me, lanterns swayed like dying fireflies. The hunters came faster than I expected. They slipped past the outer dogs without a sound. Two of them scaled the sheer rock face beside the main gate as if gravity had forgotten them. The third moved along the ridgeline like a shadow given form. When the first tripwire bell rang, they were already inside the outer yard. I fired, the bolt whistled down and struck stone where a hunter had been a heartbeat earlier. He rolled, came up, and kept moving. Another hunter vaulted onto the catwalk 2 levels below me. I heard the clash of steel and a man's shout cut short. Then everything became noise and motion. I dropped down, a level pick swinging. The hunter met me with a curved blade that sang through the air. We crashed together on the narrow walkway. Metal rang against metal. I felt the impact in my teeth. He was faster than any man I had fought, but he did not know the mine like I did. I hooked the pick behind his ankle and yanked. He fell backward off the catwalk and disappeared into the dark with a cry that ended against the rocks below. Another came at me from the side. I barely turned in time. The blade sliced across my shoulder, burning hot. I drove the pick upward under his ribs. He folded without a sound. I was bleeding. I didn't have time to care. From the control house, I heard the deep groan of ancient machinery waking. Velra. The great ore chains along the northern cut suddenly jerked to life, whipping sideways like iron snakes. One hunter was caught mid-leap and slammed against the rock wall. The second tried to dodge and found himself pinned between 2 swinging counterweights. Metal screamed, stone cracked, then the control house doors burst open. Valra stepped out onto the upper platform, one hand pressed flat against the glowing crystal panel she had somehow connected to the old systems. Blue-white light flared under her palm. The entire ore-hauling network answered her chains, whipping winches, turning floodgates of gravel opening above the western choke point. A small avalanche of black rock poured down exactly where the last hunter tried to climb. He vanished beneath the slide. Silence fell, broken only by the dying rattle of chains and the distant moan of the wind. I climbed down, blood dripping from my shoulder legs shaking. When I reached the control house platform, Valra was still standing there, breathing hard, the crystal light fading from beneath her fingers. The moment she saw me, she moved fast, almost stumbling in her haste. She stopped half a step away, eyes flicking to the cut on my shoulder, then to my face. "You're hurt," she said. The words came out rough, like they had been dragged out of her. "I'm alive," I answered. She reached out, fingers hovering just above the wound without touching. For the first time since she had appeared in my bed, I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes. Fear not for herself, but for me. I looked at her standing there under the cold mountain stars, green skin streaked with dust and faint blue light, and understood something I had been trying not to name. I wasn't protecting the station anymore. I was protecting her. Because the thought of waking up tomorrow and finding the cot empty again was suddenly more terrifying than any hunter, any blade, any secret she carried. The wind howled across the black rock once more, but inside my chest something had gone very still and very certain. She was no longer just a secret I was hiding. She had become the reason I was willing to fight. The battle was over, but the mountains still hummed with leftover tension. The chains had gone quiet. The last of the hunters had either fled or lay buried under black rock. I stood on the control platform, blood drying on my shoulder, and watched Velra slowly lower her hand from the glowing crystal panel. The blue light faded like a dying star. She turned to me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Come with me." I followed her down the narrow maintenance path that wound behind the waste piles and into a hidden cleft in the ridge. The wind cut sharper here, carrying the smell of wet stone and distant snow. After 20 minutes of silent climbing, we reached a shallow cave screened by overhanging rock. Inside lay the pod she had escaped in sleek black Seamless, the same vessel I had ordered pulled from the underground stream days earlier. It looked smaller now, almost fragile under the starlight. Velra placed her palm on its surface. A line of faint runes ignited along the hull. "This is everything I have left," she said quietly. "The last craft that can open the old paths. If my faction captures it, they will control every hidden road beneath the mountains. Thousands of my people will lose the only safety they have ever known." She turned to face me fully. The pale silver green of her skin caught the moonlight. "I must leave before they return with more hunters. If I stay, Orin 47 becomes their battlefield. Your men will die for a war that is not theirs." I felt the words settle heavy in my chest. I had known this moment was coming, but hearing it still hurt. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "The first night, when I lay beside you, it was not only because the pod was broken or because your room was the safest place I could find. I had watched you for days. I had seen how you moved through the world alone, steady, never reaching for violence first. When I slipped through your window and lay down next to you while you slept, I did it because for the first time in years, I was not afraid. Your breathing was calm. Your presence did not hunt me. I felt safe. Truly safe." She looked away for a moment as if the confession cost her something. "I do not want to leave you behind, Elias, but I will not ask you to abandon everything you have built here." I stared at the pod, at the black rock, at the distant lights of the station far below. 2 years of silence, 2 years of waking up alone, eating alone, carrying the same ghosts to bed every night. I had told myself that was peace. Now I knew it was only endurance. "I thought I wanted this life," I said. My voice sounded rough even to my own ears. The quiet, the solitude. I told myself it was enough. But the morning I woke up and found you beside me, something inside me shifted. The room felt different. The silence felt different. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't want to go back to sleeping alone. I looked at her. "I don't want to return to that life, Velra. Not anymore." She stood very still. The wind tugged at her long black hair. Then she spoke the words that would change everything. "Come with me." I blinked. "Where?" "Beyond the maps your people have drawn. Through the hidden roads beneath the mountains to places where no human has ever walked. My people's last sanctuary. You would leave this station, this mountain, this entire world you know. But you would not be alone." She held out her hand, not reaching, simply offering. I turned and looked back one last time at Orin 47. The watchtower lights flickered in the distance. The water wheel turned slowly in the gorge. My small room in the eastern tower waited there, the narrow cot, the bolted door, the empty mornings that had become my entire life. I had survived in that room, but I had not lived in it. I stepped forward and took her hand. Her fingers were warm, strong, and they closed around mine without hesitation. "I'm coming with you." A faint smile touched her lips, small, real, the first I had ever seen. She pressed her other hand to the pod. The hull split open with a soft sigh of ancient mechanisms. Inside was space enough for two. We climbed in together. The craft rose silently from the stone, gliding above the black ridge like a shadow given wings. Below us, Orin 47 grew smaller and smaller until it was only a handful of distant lights against the endless dark. The wind rushed past the hull. The stars burned brighter than I had ever seen them. I looked at Viola beside me. She was watching the mountain slide away, but her hand never left mine. The story had begun the night I went to sleep alone and woke to find an orc girl lying next to me in a room I had bolted from the inside. I had thought the strangest thing was how she had gotten in. I was wrong. The strangest, most impossible, most beautiful thing was that she had chosen to stay and that I had finally chosen to leave with her. The pod carried us into the hidden roads beneath the world, and for the first time in years I was not traveling alone. I was going home